India on Monday announced that Australia will join the upcoming Malabar exercise, which effectively means that all the 4 member countries of the Quad or Quadrilateral Coalition will be participating in the mega drill. The US and Japan are the other countries that participate in the annual exercise, which is likely to take place next month in the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. India's decision to heed to Australia's request to be part of the mega naval drill comes in the midst of growing strain in ties with China over the border row in eastern Ladakh. In this edition of Security Scan, we will analyze Australia's decision to join the Malabar exercise. Joining me on the program today are Commander Abhijit Singh, retired, Head, Maritime Policy Initiative, Observer Research Foundation; Vishnu Prakash, former Ambassador; and Vice Admiral Satish Soni, retired, former Commander-in-Chief, Southern and Eastern Command. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Security Scan. Admiral, I'd like to begin the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the importance, significance, and what the Malabar exercise really is.
Well, just to give you a historical background about the Malabar exercise, it started in 1992. This was after the breakup of the Soviet Union. As you are aware, before that, we hardly had any meaningful naval cooperation with the US Navy. And after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, we started to come closer. In 92, Malabar, in May 92, the first Malabar exercise was held, and that became the face of the fledgling Indo-US Navy cooperation at that time. Then we had about 3 exercises, and came 98. When we exploded the nuclear, when we carried out the nuclear test. And then the US imposed sanctions and the Malabar exercises were called off. And we started again in the wake of the 9/11 attacks in 2001. And ever since then, we've been having this annual exercise. 2007 was a watershed year because that was the time we first had the beginnings of the green shoots of Quad, and an exercise was held in the Bay of Bengal in which all the 4 Quad navies participated, and in addition, the Singapore Navy was also invited. Now that became a little controversial, both in internal politics of India, and China, of course, did not take it as well because it was seen as an anti-China grouping. And then political leanings shifted both in Australia and in Japan and in India, and Quad went into hibernation. And after the rejuvenation of Quad, now this is, gathered momentum again. In 2008, we had a security cooperation agreement with Japan, and in the wake of that, we started to include the Japanese Self-Defense Force Navy also in the Malabar series of exercise. And whenever the exercise was held in Japanese waters, they joined. In 2015, this was formalized because there was not as much opposition either internally or internationally to Japanese inclusion in this exercise. And there has been always a talk of Australia joining the exercise, but finally this has been formalized. So this is actually a big event in the dateline for the Malabar series of exercise. And it is of immense significance because everyone is now fed up with, the belligerent attitude of the CCP Navy. And so that is the importance, I think, of the Malabar Navy developing as a coalition to a joint response to the belligerence of the CCP Navy.
Absolutely. Right. So, Ambassador, let me bring you in now. So, was this bound to happen, considering everything that has happened in the recent past? This was the most logical step, Australia joining in the Malabar exercise because part of Quad as well, and going forward with it.
Absolutely, it was. Australia has been, for the last 3 years, been indicating a strong interest in joining the exercise. They have been wanting to deepen the relationship. So have we. There was a bit of hesitation on our part. In fact, both the US and Japan were also of the view that Australia should join. We were a little hesitant for a couple of reasons. One, in 2007, when the Quad dialogue had begun and Australia had participated in for the first time, soon thereafter, there was a change in government, and Mr. Kevin Rudd, who is a sinologist, came and he abruptly pulled Australia out. So, and Australia has very strong relations with China. So there was a bit of a question mark, but I personally feel, and I'm very impressed by the present Prime Minister, Mr. Scott Morrison, the way he has responded to Chinese bullying, notwithstanding a very strong economic relationship, the strong Chinese diaspora. He has basically shown that Australia will make sure that dignity, security is not compromised. And it was a very good time to bring Australia in. We just signed a comprehensive strategic dialogue, comprehensive strategic partnership with Australia. And then, of course, is China. I mean, without Chinese behavior, what it is, without Chinese aggression, without Chinese bullying, I would think that, the Quad may not have come to, could not have come of age. And secondly, Malabar, it would not have become that much easier to bring in Australia. So these are a variety of factors, and the world is literally at crossroads. And you find today that in Asia, the security architecture needs to be looked at anew and looked at very carefully.
Absolutely. Abhijit Singh, let me bring you into the picture now. So, China is watching all this very carefully, very closely. Why is China so concerned? Because we've seen the editorials coming out of China clearly miffed with this development.
Frank, I'd say that over the past few years, Malabar has become a sort of a barometer of the proactiveness of India, US, and Japan in the maritime realm, and something that the Chinese have always noticed. So even if you go back to the exercises that were held in 2007, in which Australia and Singapore were also a part, we know that the Chinese had vehemently objected to that coming together of 5 navies. We also know for a fact that in 2015, when the Japanese had joined, there were some murmurs in China about what exactly was this coalition up to. And of course now, even though China has reacted in a very sober fashion, the fact of the matter is that they have taken note of the fact that these navies have come together and they have formed what the Chinese believe is a sort of an Asian NATO. So the Asian NATO is a term that the Chinese had actually come up with in 2007. Their media had come up with this term when they saw that these navies were all exercising together. China's real problem is that this represents an upping of ante in the maritime realm, and the Chinese believe that this is nothing but a containment strategy to hold China back. Now, if we have to assess the maritime quad or the military quad, I would think it could be done on 3 levels: geopolitically, strategically, and tactically, operationally. I think this is a very good move geopolitically and strategically, for the simple reason that our ties with all of these 3 countries, Japan, Australia, and the United States, have been growing over a period of time. And now, after the last ministerial conference that was held, it's clear that we have to do more to strengthen our strategic relationship. Strategically, this makes great sense because this is about constructing a favorable balance of power in the region. And that's something the Chinese noticed, that what we are trying to do is trying to shift that balance of power towards the Indian Ocean, towards the democracies in the Indo-Pacific region. But the thing that I would like to state, and this is something that is up for debate, is whether this really makes any tactical sense. And I would posit that one of the things the Chinese have been smart with is that they've actually not been very aggressive in the Indian Ocean region. And the reason they have not been aggressive in the Indian Ocean region is because they don't wish to dominate the Indian Ocean in the same way that they wish to dominate the Pacific. And the Chinese have known for a fact that if we get into some sort of a quasi relationship with all of these three navies, form a sort of a counter coalition of sorts, we would project ourselves as the more aggressive side. And I just think that there is an issue of timing here as to and essentially the tactical logic of what we intend to do, because the Chinese are not actually sending their ships and submarines into Indian waters. They are neither challenging the Japanese nor the Americans or the Indians in the Indian Ocean. And therefore, by forming this coalition, there's a message that goes out to China is that we are linking what's happening on the border with the maritime domain. And we're sending out a real threat to China that we will dominate the maritime domain. We will interfere with Chinese shipping. We will interfere with Chinese naval operations if push comes to shove on the border. And that, I think, is not the sort of the right kind of message to send to China at this moment when we are kind of negotiating a truce with them on the border. So I would say that it's a positive development in the sense that it's good for us in the relationship that we have with all our three partners. But I think tactically, there are questions that it raises over what was the real idea, what was the end game, the operational end game of trying to do this vis-a-vis the PLAN presence in the Indian Ocean.
Right. All right. So taking the discussion forward now, let's talk about another aspect. So, Admiral, all these countries, be it Japan, be it Australia, be it the United States, be it India, have been talking about a free and open Indo-Pacific. They've been talking about how there should be far more freedom of movement in the seas. That having been said, do you believe that we are going to see more cooperation and coordination amongst the Quad nations? And do you believe other like-minded nations are going to join in as well and, participate in some kind of exercises in the months to come?
Well, I would say that these are very initial stages. And whilst we can be very optimistic about the grouping as a political grouping, and secondly, as an economic grouping, I think the fact that it will be an equally strong security and a military or a naval grouping, I think, cannot be said for sure at this particular time. Needless to add that it is required. Insofar as India is concerned, you have earlier seen many commentators saying that India has been holding back, and that holdback has probably been removed on account of what China has done in Ladakh. Similarly, Australia has come to the fore now, and is very strident in its approach towards China. The same thing cannot be said for the other ASEAN nations. Indonesia, for example, only recently has turned down an American request for refueling of a P-8I aircraft. Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, they seem to be dithering. But at the same time, they are very important nations. Quad by itself, just these four nations, if they can persuade the others, and we have seen this, Japan has been persuading Vietnam and the Philippines. So it depends a lot on, I think, in the next few months, how the American election, what are the results, what are the new administration going to say. There are suspicions about whether the US can stand by its allies in the manner that they expect of the US. Because there has always been a suspicion, which has in fact happened earlier, that US has not, whether it is the Mischief Reef or the Scarborough Shoal, etc. The opposition which the US could have possibly given to the Chinese actions was somewhat lacking. So in sum, I would say that, the military grouping of these Quad navies is just a beginning. There is a lot more to be done. There have to be partnerships, in the maritime domain. And this is a very important partnership. India has to look at not only Quad as a partnership, but even in the Indian Ocean, they would need more partnerships. Countries like France are extremely important. Countries like Indonesia are extremely important. And if we have to stand up to the Chinese bullying, I think we need more partners. And I would say that the Chinese, while they may not be very active in the Indian Ocean region, it is just a matter of time. You see, in naval warfare, what is most important is that you must first have surveillance capabilities to be able to actually deploy forces. Now, the Chinese have those surveillance capabilities in the South China Sea, and that is why they have become very active. Their aircrafts are based, their rocket forces can carry out attacks. No ship can transmit in the South China Sea for very much time without being getting detected and actually attacked. So their claims of being able to target the carrier battle groups is correct today. But the same claim is not as correct in the Indian Ocean region. So first, their aim would be to have adequate satellite coverages, and once they are able to maintain a maritime domain awareness in the Indian Ocean, which is comparable to what they have done in the South China Sea, I can assure you that their navy would be venturing out in the Indian Ocean region. And mark my words, in 2025 to 2030, you would have first overseas maritime command of the CCP Navy being established with headquarters in Gwadar. It is something which is staring us in the face, and we have to be aware of their moves. We cannot wish them away.
Right. So these are some really serious concerns that the Admiral has flagged off. That having been said, Ambassador, we have great bilateral ties with all the three other Quad nations. You yourself spoke about the summit that India and Australia had, a few weeks ago. It was extremely successful. The foreign minister also had an extremely successful visit to Japan, where an agreement was signed on artificial intelligence, cyber security, and critical information infrastructure. So these are very, very crucial developments that have taken place. Let's not forget the 2+2 between India and the United States also is scheduled to take place soon. Bilaterally, the ties are very strong. But as a combined unit, what is the potential of the Quad from a security perspective and from a foreign policy perspective too?
I would like to quote here what a senior State Department official said about Quad in Tokyo itself. And she said, quote unquote, when you think of the Quad, you think of security. I think the whole raison d'etre of Quad is to provide security. Let me elaborate. When we talk of a free and open Indo-Pacific region, when we talk of freedom of navigation, when we talk freedom of overflights, why are we talking about that if there is no challenge? Because there is a challenge, we are talking about that. Let us not keep our eyes closed to the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room which is posing that challenge, and it is not hypothetical. The elephant in the room has already shown what it is capable of in the South China Sea. While the president in 2015, when he had gone to the US for a summit with Obama, said that they were not militarizing South China Sea. The premier said that, and yet we know what has happened to South China Sea. I completely agree with the Admiral that it is not a question of if, it's a question of when. When it comes to the Chinese coming to the Indian Ocean region, their ultimate objective is to have a blue water navy. And I recall just last year in January, Admiral Lamba had chaired a meeting of the naval chiefs, and when he had mentioned that in 200 years of human history, no navy has expanded the way Chinese navy has. If they have set up military bases in Djibouti, in Gwadar, and under the BRI also, the whole objective is to get ports. It is not just for the love of it. There is a game plan, and they want to create a Sino-centric world order, or at least an Asian order, and it is very much a part of that. So security cannot be, we have to be able to talk about security openly. You are absolutely right that we have very good bilateral relations, but Malabar exercises and other dialogue processes enable us to work together. The name of the game is interoperability. I am always find it difficult to pronounce this word, and we are getting into more complex exercises. But before I conclude, I do need to mention two brief points. One, expand. It is not the time for expansion of Quad, at least, and by that token, of the Malabar exercises also, save bringing in Singapore now and then, because the process is still evolving. We are still learning to work with each other, and the Deputy Secretary of State Begun has said it in so many words that this is not the time yet to expand Quad. That is one. Secondly, it is many people believe that their US is uncertain. There is a bit of a fatigue that is setting in. Question is whether the US public is ready to endorse an operation by the US in the Indo-Pacific theater if that is required. Let's say vis-a-vis Taiwan. So there are uncertainties of the level of US commitment, and all these factors have to be weighed in. And that is why efforts like Malabar exercises, Quad, for India, Japan, and Australia, because we will continue to be in the Indo-Pacific region.
Sure.
And others may come and go, but we are there. So this cooperation is very important, and we need to build on that, because this threat from China, this aggression from China is not going to go away.
Absolutely. Abhijit Singh, so several concerns raised there by the previous two speakers. What's our option really? That is one. Secondly, what would we like to achieve through the Malabar exercise? Is it, subtle messaging, or is it something else?
Look, I mean, I would agree, first of all, with both the Admiral as well as the Ambassador that China is certainly a threat. It's a threat in the Pacific. It's a threat in the Indian Ocean region. And yet there are certain nuances to China's presence in the Indian Ocean, which is really a theater of concern that are worth highlighting. First, as I've noted, the Chinese have two separate strategies for the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And the Pacific, as I said, it is full spectrum dominance. They recognize that these waters are China's rim seas, and they demand a greater degree of push and a greater degree of dominance in that theater. In the Indian Ocean, I would say this, that Shiv Shankar Menon, Ambassador Shiv Shankar Menon, often says that with China there is often a push factor and a pull factor, which means that whilst the Chinese are pushing in the Indian Ocean region, Indian Ocean states, smaller island states, are also pulling China towards them. So the Chinese, if you look at the Belt and Road Initiative that we have not talked about, is very welcome in the region with a lot of countries. Talk about Maldives, talk about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Thailand, Myanmar. All of these countries are very willing to work with China in the region. So what the Chinese have actually done is that they've constructed a very smart strategy that combines both military presence as well as a geo-economic blueprint. And the geo-economic blueprint is BRI. So what they've done is that they've organically created a need for China in the region. And look at the missions that they involve themselves in. It's anti-piracy, it's humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, it is non-combatant evacuations, it's peacekeeping. Now, how do you expect India and the rest of the Quad partners to actually push back China or push out China from the Indian Ocean region, when what the Chinese are actually seeking to do, or at least what they want the world to believe they are seeking to do, is to just provide a security good? And what they are trying to tell the region is that we are here with our money, we are here with our investment, please take advantage of our presence in these waters. So I think what our strategy should be, to answer your question, is not to just look at the Quad in terms of security, even though I would agree that it is the principal element of this whole construction, the whole conception of the Quad. I think what we've got to do is to look beyond that, to also look at issues, and we've begun to recognize all of this, such as infrastructure building, such as connectivity, such as technology, such as 5G. So and investment. So what we are then able to do is to construct this bigger framework in which we are able to allow for a full spectrum pushback of China, not just in the military realm, but also in the economic realm, also in the technology realm. That is, I think, the way forward to push out China from the Indian Ocean region, not to just focus on security, but on other areas that might be equally important as well.
Sure. Points taken. Okay, quick closing comments now from all my guests. I've got about a minute left, so please be brief. Starting first with the Ambassador. I saw you putting up your hand. You wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you. On BRI, let me say that there is a veneer of offering economic assistance or developmental assistance. That veneer is wearing thin. Even in South Asia, country after country, Maldives, etc., are realizing what they have gotten into.
Right.
So I'm not saying that BRI is not bringing in funds, but it is coming with strings attached, and there is an ulterior motive.
Sure.
Now,
Admiral.
Okay, you want me to stop? Sure.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador.
Well,
Admiral.
Yeah, I would like to say that in the wake of what has happened in the north, we should not lose focus on the maritime domain. That is where our long-term interest lies. The Indian Navy has not been receiving the kind of budgeting that it budgetary support, and we need to enhance that support on an urgent basis so that there are no capability gaps which emerge. And secondly, I would like to say that IORA and IONS have a very important role to play to get these nations together to concentrate on non-traditional challenges like IUU, HADR, etc. I mean, this is what is bothering the smaller countries, and India must be in the forefront to solve these problems. Only then we can keep the extra-regional powers away.
Absolutely. And Abhijit Singh, close the show for us with a quick concluding remark.
I'd only like to make one comment, which is that the real challenge to India from China in the Indian Ocean is actually Chinese submarines. And a lot of these submarines are floating around in South Asia, and we need to do something to deter these Chinese operations. So I think what we need to focus is on underwater deterrence capability. We've got to get sonars, we've got to get sonobuoys, we need a whole set of underwater sensors to be able to detect these Chinese submarines. So we need to go beyond basically aerial surveillance of China, which is what we are focusing on right now, and get the Quad also to build our